Welcome to the final video of the methodology for school psychological intervention evaluation. Now you have watched more than 40 minutes of content related to the Well-19 project objectives, the methodology definition, the variables included, and the elaboration and implementation of the questionnaire. So, we think it is important to, in this video, retake a bit all what we have seen in the previous ones, have an overall idea of the methodology and variables, and remember how to implement and analyze the survey developed. So let's start. As we saw in the introduction video, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, most schools in the European Union and program countries have been closed for a period of time. This had a psychological impact in both the teachers and also the students. In order to encourage the school educational system in the promotion of psychological support services for school students and teachers, with this project, we aim to disseminate innovations and adaptations in research, training and practice that help to inform and advance the educational field during COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the services offered by the psychologists in the school. The COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic has had a strong impact on the educational community. Besides the public health crisis, it has also influenced students' re-entry to schools during lockdown and beyond. Not only teaching methodologies, but also the relationship between teachers, students and families had to be modified. Routines and lifestyles have changed, making it necessary to adapt to these new situations and cope with uncertain and uneasy since March 2020. We are facing a pandemic that has affected millions of people, including many children and adolescents. And the psychological and educational impact is beginning to be known through some studies. Our contribution through these videos aims to find out about the specific effects of the psychoeducational and the psychoemotional level, and to discover how to mitigate them with prevention and intervention strategies in schools, as well as intervention strategies and reviewing other studies and initiatives carried out in different countries. The pandemic situation, the confinement, and the distant education have had a negative effect consequences on an emotional level and on the different members of the educational community, which have manifested themselves in the following ways of the educational community. The coronavirus pandemic affected the whole world, brought problems and many complications, offered perspectives and new alternatives, and promote advances in the use of technology in education. However, the poorest students in the population and the most vulnerable minorities, for example, students with disabilities, from indigenous people, from rural areas, and other mother tongue languages, are the ones who are most affected in their academic progress, and most at risk of difficulties in the field of education and psychological development. The closure of schools not only implied the interruption of the academic progress and learning achievements, but also the suspension of students' access to other important basic services such as school breakfast, sport programs, extracurricular activities, and psychopedagogical support. Prolonged school closures can therefore cause further educational, psychological, and health harms, especially among the most vulnerable. Students who are confined are at greater risk not only of failing behind academically, but also about emotional problems, use of technological devices, or physical, psychological, or sexual abuse. It is also important to mention that the right to education of children and adolescents in our country has been violated due to the close of the school year at the beginning of August. Many students, especially from low income and remote areas, are not going in an academic activities due to the closure of a school year, and also because their families have not been able to support the cost of internet use and connectivity to continue with some kind of classes or distant learning. In reality, there are a very few advantages or pros to the closure, as it has been going on for so long. However, it is necessary to recognize that it will not be possible to return to the classroom as before pandemic, because it is not yet possible to predict the behavior of the virus over time, and because it is difficult to maintain all hygienic and biosecurity measurements in the schools. In addition to psychological distancing, especially among the youngest children. All of the above reflects that educational disparities will be further accentuated, especially for the poorest and most vulnerable groups, with the great risk that students will fall further and further behind in their learning, and that because of this they will not return to schools and will drop out. It is therefore necessary to take action to prevent educational disruption and ensure access to flexible blended learning modalities that can reach all children to learn at home, including those who do not have access to the internet or have difficulties using it. This is what we are going through these open education resources of videos for teachers. Also, as explained in the first video, we develop in this project the manual, capability and expertise for school teachers and the policy recommendation document. In these videos, we have presented you a methodology developed for the analysis of the situation of the psychological services in the school. And as we said, this methodology can be extrapolated. So remember that you can apply it in your own schools or your region if you detect the need of improvement of psychological services. The methodology counts on a total of 22 variables organized in 7 different categories. The categories are the following: organizational structure and care protocols applied in the centers, type of psychological intervention, situation of the role of the psychologist in the school, information collected during COVID-19, organizational structure and care protocols applied in the centers, type of psychological intervention, and finally, the status of the school psychologist's role in the schools. Once the variables were established, it was determined that it would be important to collect information on the state of psychologists in the schools before, during, and after COVID-19 to compare the information and establish more precisely the possible intervention needs. This led us to the explanation of the survey developed based on the variables explained. As we explained, a survey is a method of gathering information using relevant questions from a sample of people with the aim of understanding populations as a whole. Surveys provide a critical source of data and insights for everyone engaged in the information economy, from business to media to governments and also academics. We developed a total of 21 questions based on the topics of the variables presented before. The questionnaire counted on both open and closed questions. Remember that open questions means that the interview is free to answer whatever he or she considers. And the closed questions are those ones which includes an answer option with the question, and the respondent only can select one or more of the given answers. Most of the 21 questions included in the survey were open questions. The questionnaire was structured in 5 different sections. The first one was the introduction, a text that describes the objective of the questionnaire. The second was the respondents' details, with 2 questions about studies and profession and also the country. The third section was the situation before COVID-19. This is a big one that includes a total of 9 different questions divided into 3 different topics: organizational structure and care protocols in your schools, types of psychological intervention, and the situation or role of the psychologist in the school. The fourth section was focused on analyzing which was the situation during the worst period of the COVID-19 pandemic situation. And finally, the last question is the current situation. Remember that before the analysis you need to collect at least 30 responses, and if your aim is to do a comparison between the countries, you will need a total of 30 respondents per country. Then, it is the point for the analysis of the results obtained with the questionnaire. The analysis can be based into 2 different perspectives. The first perspective is to compare between before COVID, during COVID, and possible solutions for the future. The second perspective is to compare between the different countries analyzed. We encourage you to group and merge all the answers by the meanings, not by the words used. That way, you will come up collecting and describing the concepts obtained in the surveys. Thank you very much for watching these videos about the methodology, and do not hesitate to continue watching the next chapters.